Well, week two of the election campaign saw both sides make policy announcements on disabilities and law and order, but it's more likely to be remembered for the leaks that have dogged the Prime Minister and for Kevin Rudd's sudden hospitalisation this afternoon. To discuss a week that kept getting stranger, I'm joined by Paul Howes, National Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union, and Michael Kroger, former President of the Victorian Liberal Party. Great to have you both with us in person.
Lee. Thanks, Lee.
Paul Howes, who won the week?
Well, you got to say, by default, it was probably the Coalition's week. I don't think they earned it. They didn't work very hard for it. But certainly, you know, you can't put a gloss on this. It's been a bad week for Labor. The leaks were very damaging. The ongoing media speculation, whipped up by some pretty dubious characters in the Coalition. The background briefing by senior members of the Coalition of senior journalists about Julia's marital status and religion certainly doesn't help. But, you know, fair's fair. Week two probably goes to the Coalition.
Michael Kroger?
Well, that was a desperate contribution, I must say. Look, if you can't stop the leaks, you won't stop the boats. Oh. And this is a government in a world of pain.
What do you mean if you can't stop the leaks, you can't stop the boats?
Well, you know, Wayne Swan says there's nothing they can do about stopping the leaks. If they can't stop their own side from attacking each other during an election campaign, imagine what's going to happen after the election. So there's no policy that this government can implement without a world of pain. They're not going to be able to stop the boats. They can't keep the economy under control. They can't announce a population target. They can't seem to do anything. They are gripped by indecision and fear and neurosis. This is a government in crisis. And I don't think the electorate are going to re-elect this government, and nor should they. Is
Paul Howes right when he says, though, that your side won the week by default?
Certainly not. Certainly not. Tony Abbott had 5 tremendous announcements during the week. Julia Gillard had some important announcements too. But this is a government in utter chaos. I mean, why would the electorate put this mob back? You've got Keating attacking Hawke. You've got Rudd attacking Gillard. Gillard doesn't like Rudd. Latham's attacking all of them. It's just a fruitcake. I mean, no one's ever seen anything like this. And if this is happening, Lee, during the election, what is going to happen if these people get re-elected? We're going to have 3 more years of this chaos because Kevin Rudd is going to be a member of the Cabinet, leaking against Gillard and the other people who executed him. And as Mark Latham has said, you know, he is the leaker.
Paul Howes, is it utter chaos and a fruitcake, as Michael Kroger says?
Michael, yet again, is being very presumptuous, and he'll want to talk about this all night because this is his strategy.
Well, it's the only thing anyone's talking about,
This is his strategy.
No one's talking about anything else.
I'll let you finish, Michael. I'll let you finish. This is his entire strategy, and it's a strategy of senior backroom operators in the Liberal Party like Michael, and that is to talk about some of these distractions that have happened in the Labor camp, ignore policy, don't talk about what happened during the global financial crisis, don't talk about the great state the Australian economy is in, and just focus on these internal issues. Now that might be interesting to the, you know, to use US speak, inside the Beltway, but that doesn't make a scrap of difference to the lives of the working families across this country. It doesn't make a scrap of difference to the lives of my members.
But the problem is, though, that the Labor side has, through their own actions, created that opening.
Look, it's been a horrible week. It's been hard. But it doesn't matter. These issues are not the issues that matter. This is not the first cabinet that's ever had a leak. I remember some very high-profile leaks from the Howard cabinet. There was obviously the ongoing tension for 10 years between the ongoing tension for 10 years between Michael's mate Peter Costello and John Howard. Now, did that destabilise and destroy that government? Absolutely not. Is this destabilising and destroying this government? Absolutely not. Is this the issue that matters to the 200,000 working Australians who have their jobs today solely because of Labor's interventionist approach during the global financial crisis? Of course it makes not a difference.
But what is Labor going to do, though, about this leak? Because you don't know when or where the next leak may come from. And as you concede, it's distracting attention from other things you'd like to talk about.
Well, I think the Prime Minister handled the issue very admirably. I think it was her best performance of the campaign. She spoke openly and honestly about the way that she thinks about major issues of financial consequence, that she won't just sign off willy-nilly on cabinet proposals, will actually question them, debate them, but ultimately make the right decision in the country's interest. And Labor will do what it's been doing all week, talking about the issues that matter to working Australians. Things like the NBN announcement today, rolling out to 93% of our homes, our schools, our businesses, this broadband revolution which will revolutionise the Australian economy, revolutionise Australian healthcare, revolutionise our education system. Those are the issues that matter to working Australians, not whether Michael's getting excited and salacious over Mark Latham's comments or or who is leaking from the cabinet. That doesn't matter. That doesn't make a difference to the lives of Australians.
Well, I'll tell you what does make a difference, and that's stable government. You're not going to be able to run a government in this country with the internal chaos that you've got at the minute.
But Michael Kroger, 6 months ago, think back to how the Liberal Party
let's do 4 at a time.
So presumably...
Yeah, but Lee, that was 8 months ago. We've had tremendous stability.
So are you telling me all those divisions in the party between left and right, they're just all gone now, are they?
Well, what you've got at the minute is a situation where the Liberal Party hasn't been as united as this for many years, and that's to do with the fact that Abbott is an immensely popular figure within the Liberal Party. There's no one in the Liberal Party who doesn't like Tony Abbott. There's a friend of mine in Melbourne says you can always judge someone by the people around them. And Abbott is a person who is immensely liked, who has grown enormously in the job. Paul says, oh, you know, these are salacious, you know, gossip that I and others are, you know, talking about. Wake up, son. Everybody in the whole country is talking about what is going on. Now, I'm not going to use tonight your relatively young and youthful inexperience against you. The bottom line is this, Paul. You are not going to be able to run this country. As Bob Hawke said, if you can't govern yourselves, you're not going to be able to govern the country. We've never seen anything like this in my lifetime.
Well, Grandad, just have a think about the first term of the Howard government. Think about the amount of cabinet ministers that were lost. Think about the leaks. Think about the splits that emerged within the coalition during that period between 96 and 98. Does that mean that Howard didn't deserve to be re-elected?
Let me pick up on that and say that then let me pick up on that and say that in 1998, despite all of those issues that John Howard had been having, he still went to the election with a really big, ambitious policy, the GST. Took a big risk to take that to the electorate. What is Labor?
Lost the popular vote. Lost the popular vote.
He was still re-elected.
Lost the popular vote.
What is Labor taking to the electorate this time around that shows that it's got the courage of its convictions, that's inspiring the electorate?
Well, look at the announcement today. Look at the announcement today. Now, you might scoff at this, but the rolling out of this broadband technology across our schools, across our hospitals, across our businesses, across our homes will revolutionise the way that Australia works. It will revolutionise the way we learn. It will revolutionise the way we receive our healthcare. Think about the record that this Labor government has in terms of its economic management during the global financial crisis. 200,000 jobs, according to Treasury analysis, that have been saved simply because of the stimulus packages. This is a proud record, and we know that Tony Abbott opposes those stimulus measures. So if he'd been Prime Minister during the global financial crisis, we would be seeing unemployment rates in Australia right now just like they are in the United States at about 9.8%, in the United Kingdom at 7.8%. We're here in Australia, we're relatively lucky to have that 5.1% unemployment rate.
Paul, how can the Australian electorate trust you to roll out a $42 billion program, allegedly putting broadband in every home in this country, or 93% of them, when you couldn't put pink bats in people's roofs?
Well, Michael, they don't need to trust me because I'm not up for election. But the
How
reason
could they trust Gillard? I mean, Gillard should have... Kevin Rudd's great problem... I'll tell you what Kevin Rudd's main fault was. He should have sacked Gillard. He sacked Garrett, and she got promoted. Why wasn't she sacked? She wasted more money. She was a more incompetent minister than Garrett was, yet because she had a factional base, he couldn't get rid of her. That was his big mistake. But her incompetence over the building education revolution, it was manifest. Her record is probably that of the most incompetent minister the Australian Parliament has ever seen.
Michael Kroger, you said before everybody was talking about the troubles within Labor, but I would argue that everybody is also talking about the fact that this has been a boring, uninspiring campaign. If you read across the newspapers, that seems to be the general consensus. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think what you've seen, and I give Julie Gillard credit, she's been disciplined, so has Tony Abbott. They've both been measured, they're sticking to their lines, they're announcing their policies. You know, we're not flicking the switch to vaudeville during this election campaign. These are two serious campaigners in a very difficult economic climate.
But if you compare this election to, say, 2007, where we were talking about work choices being overhauled, we were talking about climate change and ratifying Kyoto, we were talking about the apology to Indigenous Australians, those were really big ideas that were marking a significant change in direction. What are we seeing in this campaign that rivals any of that?
Well, what we're seeing is a number of major policies from the opposition. A big policy in relation to immigration. This is a very major policy. a very major policy in relation to taxation, a very major policy which is coming in relation to broadband in this country. You're seeing a lot of serious policies from the coalition, but these are against the backdrop of a budget that's in deficit. What you're also seeing from the Labor point of view is a government that is bereft of ideas. I mean, you know, at least Rudd had some ideas. He had no idea how to implement them, poor fella. He was hopeless at implementing them, but at least he had some big ideas. Julia Gillard's got no ideas left in the locker, and this is partly as a result of the fact that she came to the Prime Ministership very close to the election when she thought about no grand policy ideas for the election.
Paul Howes, the retiring New South Wales Labor MP John Della Bosca, who's also obviously been very well regarded as a strategist for the party, said today that focus groups and polling are tools and that they shouldn't become the master. Do you agree with him that those things are becoming too influential in driving policy?
I don't know. I don't think so, because certainly when I, as an active member of the Labor Party, argue for policies and change within the party, I'm not thinking about focus groups. I'm not thinking about polling. Now, clearly, the coalition is. Now, if you think about what Michael just said, he's right. Tony Abbott has a very clear and very bold policy initiative on immigration. He's going to be, if he's Prime Minister, he'll be the only Prime Minister, only head of any government in the developed world that is putting a cap on migration permanently. That is why respected institutions like the Business Council of Australia, like the Australian Industry Group, like AMA, like every respected employer organisation in the country and business lobby group, many of them Michael's close friends, are aghast at this prospect that he will put a temper on our future economic growth simply because he's playing dog whistle politics out there in certain electorates.
You must be hearing that from people you mix with, Michael Kroger.
Oh, some people don't like the policy. I think the majority of Australians do like it. Look, Australia has suffered from a failure of successive governments to build and develop our infrastructure. You look at the train system in Victoria. If the train actually arrives, if you're not suffocated or squashed, you're lucky to get to work on time.
You should give up your fight against Jeff Kennett.
The train system in Victoria is a disgrace, and public transport around the country is a disgrace. The hospitals are not working properly. You know, you drive in Sydney today. The streets are overflowing with cars. There's blockages everywhere. I mean, the whole infrastructure in this country hasn't had sufficient funds spent on it probably for 10 or 20 years. And this is one of the great problems, and this is the quality of life issue that people are talking about, and that is utterly legitimate for people to talk about that.
Well, what's the coalition's health policy then about hospitals?
Isn't it time then, if that's the case, for governments and oppositions to put out some bold policies in terms of dealing with these things?
Yeah, but what you're talking about are policies in a climate where you've got massive budget deficits. You've got a huge debt run-up by this federal government. I mean, Paul says, we staved off the recession. Well, yeah, what costs $40 or $50 billion that we're going to be left with?
We have 6%. The debt will plateau out at 6% of GDP. The combination of the advanced economies around the world, you know this, is running at 94.2% GDP as opposed to 6%. Think about that. Yeah. 94.2, rest of the world.
Well, you look down that 6%. Camera and thank Costello and Howard.
And as I said this morning, I'm not one of those that won't pay tribute to their legacy. But what I do know is this: that if Tony Abbott had his hands on the economic levers of this country during the global financial crisis, based on his statements, we would have in excess of 1 million people unemployed.
Okay, we've made that point. Let me ask you about a couple of other issues. Paul Howes, do you think, are there any issues in the national interest that we're not hearing enough about during this campaign? I'll throw out the issue, say, for example, of Indigenous affairs. It hasn't been discussed on the campaign. Surely it's one of the most pressing issues facing the country.
Well, look, we've got 3 weeks to go in the election. We've only had 2 weeks down. I think both parties will be announcing many more policies as we go along.
Is there anything in particular that you...
I'd like to talk about the economy more. I'd like to get off the gossip, get off the rumour mill that Michael and his mates